Okay, so as Claire mentioned, we are going to go over the status of the 2025 vision plan. We're going to discuss some of the items that were identified as partially complete or unfinished, and then we're also going to talk about your strategic focus areas. Maybe we are.
Maybe not.
Melissa, could you? Thank you. Okay, so I'm not going to go over all of this right now. You heard a lot of this yesterday in the Lewisville 2035 presentation, but just for those who may not have been here yesterday or are unfamiliar with the plan, it was approved in 2014. Work on it started in 2013. Then in 2019, the 5-year touch point began. So that actually, again, started in 2019, went throughout the span of 2020 in the height of COVID, and then the official update occurred in 2021. And as you heard yesterday, there was over 4,000 touch points in that process. So significant public engagement there. And then coming into the more recent years, we did receive an implementation award in 2020 from the American Planning Association. This plan has actually received multiple awards, but in particular, we wanted to point out this one in terms of implementation. We've made a lot of progress on this plan. And then every year we publish an annual report, and I believe you actually have this report in your packets. For those that are watching online, this was sent to your mailbox earlier this week, and this just provides those annual updates on those big moves and strategic moves. So where are we at today? We've accomplished the majority of the plan items, about 77%. That does include some that are complete but ongoing, and then a few items that were determined to be not feasible as well. That leaves 38 action tasks that remain. So this will look familiar to you, but I'm just going to explain it in a little more detail for, again, for those who may not be familiar with the plan. So what you see in this image here is a ranking that we asked council and staff to complete. So the further column on the left over there, that is your big move or your strategic move that aligns with what you see in the vision plan. And then there are goals for each of those big moves as well. The action priorities, those were the items that you were asked to score. Status update, the majority of these that you saw were partially complete. We did have a few where we have not made a whole lot of significant progress, but for the most part, we've done work on all of these. And then on the score column, you were asked to score these on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being little to no importance or potentially not feasible, and then 10 being critical and urgent. And then you were given the opportunity to select up to 3 action priorities to give them an additional 5 points of special consideration. So this is just if something was really, really important to you, you could give it that extra push. And then what you see on the far right there is that total score when we add all of these up. So when we compare the rankings between council and staff, council did on average score these priorities a little bit higher than staff. That average was 7.04. And then staff's average was at 6.53. So on the next slide here, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the comparison between those two lists. Anything that you see a star icon next to means it was identified as a top priority by both council and staff. So we're looking at those as more of our consensus items. But before I do that, I wanted to call your attention to something that was discussed yesterday in the Lewisville 2035 presentation. There was a vision statement that was updated during that touch point, and it said, by 2025 and beyond, Lewisville will be a community that focuses on resource management, connectivity, diversity, and growth. And so when we talk about these action priorities, you're going to see a lot of these fall into those categories. A lot of them fall under your big moves. A lot of them fall under the strategic focus areas. So we're really making sure that we're aligned across all of those points. So there's a lot of text on this slide. I'm not going to sit here and read through all of this. We are going to go over these in detail here in just a minute. But basically, you have seen these before. This is everything that you ranked. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is council's top scored list. And again, everything with a star here is indicated on both council's list and staff's list. One thing I wanted to point out here is that when you compare council's list to staff's list, the number 1 item was the same on both. It's that top one there. Develop a strategy for maintenance and rehabilitation of apartment complexes that improves our residents' quality of life. You heard a presentation about this yesterday. In fact, the majority of retreat has been scheduled around your strategic focus areas. So you've heard about a lot of these initiatives already, but we're just going to be talking about some of those more specific, concrete, achievable items today. So I'm going to quickly go down the items that were consensus items. Again, I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm going to use council's list as I go down this here. So the second item that was on both lists is evaluating additional activities that would bring people to Old Town, continuing to expand our nuisance abatement programs for multifamily and our hotel properties, improving the access and connection of all residents to jobs, education, and resources, providing free public Wi-Fi at our parks, expanding the dialogue with communities of color to understand their experiences and identify ways that we can improve Lewisville, using data to identify areas where we really need more engagement between our community and our staff, developing an inventory of retail establishments, involving our entire community in implementation of Lewisville 2025. So this is really important. This is not just developing 2025. This is engaging them in the implementation, and you did hear a little bit about that yesterday in the 2035 presentation. And then the last one was securing adequate green centerpiece resources. So we're looking at Leela and the Nature Center there. So all of those items you see on the right-hand side on staff's list as well. And what we're showing you here is we've marked all of your top 10 items in green, if we want to use that as our basis for discussion today. But then you see those remaining items just below that, so you can see where that cutoff point would be if you want to discuss what we want to do with those items. And so I think one other thing that I wanted to talk about on this slide was the items that were not starred. So just because it's not a consensus item doesn't mean it's not important. I just wanted to call those out so you're aware of where councils and staff's rankings differed a little bit. So on the council side, item number 8 related to identifying data to monitor issues in our group populations. Wayfinding, item number 10, wayfinding, messaging, and informational materials. And then item number 13, continuing the conversation on racial inclusiveness and ideas that make this area a place where we want to live. So again, that's not to say this wasn't important to staff, it's just that it fell differently on that priority list. And then on staff's list, the items that staff scored a little bit higher were item number 3 on the right-hand side, related to Central I-35. This is related to redevelopment incentives. Then item number 6 related to developing a plan for landfills, and item number 10 related to all gateways. This is just improving those gateways to provide those distinct entrances. And at this point, I think Gina is going to walk you through some of the different options for how we can look at this data.
Before we go, can I ask a question about this? I'm trying to understand the STAR system here. So we have data-driven organization. There's no STAR on council side. Does that mean it wasn't as important as other things to council? Because the numbers seem to indicate that it was higher than some of the ones that are starred, right?
So what the stars mean is just that particular action priority, not necessarily the big move, that the action priority was identified in the top 13 items on both lists. And here in just a second, I'll advance to the next slide.
Wait, I'm sorry, before you move, can you go back? Because this is where I'm confused, because when I look over on the staff side, if I'm the only one with the question here, maybe I'll follow up with you afterwards. Because when I look on the staff side, I can see there's a star by data-driven organization, and it's high. It looks appropriate. But on the council side, I see something with a star like economic vitality number 9 is lower ranked than data-driven organization. So I don't know why that got a star, but item 8 didn't.
It's on both lists.
So it's on both lists.
Yeah, if it has a star, then both staff and council ranked it high.
So on council's list, you see that economic vitality one, number 9, related to the developing an inventory of retail establishments.
Right.
If you look on staff's list, that would be number 11. So it's on both lists. It's just in a different order depending on how the scoring averaged out.
Right. That one has a star on both. I'm going back to Patrick's question. A data-driven number 8, no star, but 8.43 for the council side. And then data-driven number 9, but 7.38 and a star for staff.
Those are two different action priorities.
Oh, got it. Oh,
Thank you.
it's a priority in the middle.
Sorry,
Gotcha.
yes, I
No,
should
no.
have explained that.
Yeah.
The order of them is different. The only thing that stayed the same between the two lists and the order that you see them is the top one. So that was the one that ranked the highest on both lists. Everything else is reordered by the score that averaged out. So council score, that's your average across all 7 of you. Staff's, that's the average across all
Right.
20 or so staff. So that order is different.
Right.
Yeah, so if you look at the left-hand column on both charts, that is essentially that final ranking.
It's the action priority that's different, not the, okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Kristen.
Sorry, I
for
should have
speaking, Patrick.
clarified that. I
appreciate
understand the confusion now.
I haven't had any coffee. Okay.
So as Ashley said, there are a couple of ways that we can look at this. We can look at just your council ranking, and we can just talk about it. We can look at just staffs, or we can look at an average of council and staff. If we look at this average, that means a couple of yours fall off and a couple of ours go on just due to the rankings and where they now are prioritized. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how do you want to look at this, and do you want to kind of take into consideration the differences between staff and talk about that, or would you like to just focus on council top priorities?
It's personally easier for me to digest having them both kind of separated, because then I'm like flipping back and forth to try to see which ones, or if you want to point out which ones fell off with the combined list. What fell off?
So on the combined list, number 8 of yours, which was identify data to use in monitoring issues among populations in group quarters, such as senior living centers, that would fall off.
Okay.
And I think our staff rated that a little bit lower because it seems a little hard to digest and hard to say whether or not we're successful. We really don't know what that means as well. So this one seemed a little, how do we go out next year and do this?
Which one was that?
It's number 8
On our list.
Is that the only one that fell off?
No, also number 13, which was your bottom one, continue the conversation of racial inclusiveness and ideas which will help Lewisville be the kind of place where all residents want to work and live. I think that one fell off only because we have number 6, which is expand dialogue with communities of color to understand their experiences and identify actions to improve Lewisville as a place for them to all. Those are similar to us. So I think it was, do we need both?
Yeah.
And so this is the combined.
And to add on to that, when we're
No,
talking
this is
about
the combined.
items falling off, what we're trying to get at today
Yeah,
is
number 8,
what do we
13.
need to focus on in fiscal year 2026? So what is our immediate priority going into next year's budget? And then some of these other items we can focus on in Lewisville 2035. So just because it falls below that line doesn't mean we're not going to do it. But what we're really trying to get it at is what do we need to focus on next year? What should we be looking at in Lewisville 2035? And then if there are a few that we need to remove, we can consider that as well.
I also wanted to point out that this is aspirationally to be done in all future council retreats. The reason why is because you have your short-term goals, your middle-term goals, and your long-term goals. So your long-term goals are going to be your vision plan, right? When we do 2025, it's all of the things in the plan. You also will have that in 2035. What we want to do is bring, then you have the strategic focus areas. Those are kind of your middle range plans. Those are like, we want staff to work on the mall. Well, we know that's not necessarily going to hit next year and we'll get it done next year, but it is, in the next 5 years, we need to be actively working on that. But a lot of these things are very granular, and staff really has been kind of picking and choosing how to prioritize things along the way. Now, we know kind of what your priorities are, but you really don't have, you haven't had a real strong say in, hey, this needs to pop up before all the other stuff. This allows you guys to have that opportunity where when we get 2035 done, we're going to put the hundreds of priorities down or action items down, and every year we want to show you where we are and basically let you guys reorganize it based on what y'all's priorities are and what the community's priorities. So we're starting that process now, just so you understand. What we have a bunch of to-dos that are left. And so that's what we're trying to gather on. What should we try to do in the next fiscal year if we can fit it into the budget? Just so you see the big picture of what we're trying to do long-term.
So at this point, you want us to kind of talk through some of these things and what are, I have one that I'd like to talk about. Are we ready for that, or?
I think what we need to know first is, are you guys wanting to work off of, like, which list do you want to work off of?
I'm fine with the average.
I like
The average? Okay.
Okay, so then,
I prefer the average.
Yeah. Okay.
perfect. So if you will bear with us for just a second, we're going to go ahead and pull up a spreadsheet, and what we can do is we can mark these items as something we want to focus on in 2026, or if we want to flag them as 2035 items, if we want to remove some as well. So we're going to go ahead and pull that up now.
And while we're doing that, I will just add that the very top one, like we said, was the staff top one and council top one, and dealing with multifamily and rehab. And that one, we've done a lot. You know, since this plan, we've had multifamily inspections now. You know, we've done where we talked about affordable housing. So we are constantly working on this one. It says partially complete because it's really, are we ever done with this?
It will never be complete.
This one, and sometimes that's hard for staff because we go back and we're like, okay, did we complete everything in the Lewisville 2025 plan? Yes and no. I mean, we've made a lot of headway, but we haven't solved affordable housing for the world. You know, I mean, that one's going to be a continuing kind of mission that we have. So when you see partially complete on a lot of these, it's like we're making headway, but we just want to make sure that you want us to continue in that vein. That's one. But then there will be some more as we're going through this that we're like, we're not really sure what this means or when we will be successful. So those are the kind of things we want to talk through as we're getting those.
I appreciate that sentiment. I mean, you run across the same things in business, right? You have things that are strategic, that are just things you do, they're ongoing, and they're not complete. Then you have things that are objectives. You go through and say, I can measure this as objectives. It would help me, not for this meeting clearly, because we're already down the path, but I think those are different buckets of things to consider, because I'd hate for something just to linger on a plan that's a more strategic focus. Where do you want us to focus strategically? But here's the things we can accomplish in a year, and that's how you measure those things. But it would help me to see those as separate buckets.
You know, it's even, as we're thinking through this and we're about to develop the 2035 plan, it's a great idea to figure out how to write that plan in that exact way.
Yeah, quantify
so that
things,
each year we're really checking off things that we can come back and talk about rather than have some of both in the list.
To your point, people are going to see this partially complete and the optics are poor, right? It's like, well, what did you do for the past 10 years? Well, a lot.
A lot, yeah.
That's right. Okay.
Right.
Melissa, can we jump over to that average tab, please? Thank you. It'll be the third tab on your spreadsheet at the bottom, final ranking averaged. And so one thing I want to point out here that I didn't point out on the presentation is that those 10 items that we flagged as consensus items, when we averaged the scores, they ended up being your top 10 items as well. So what you're seeing on this average list are those same 10 consensus items. And then over in column H, just in case you're curious, if you wanted to know the difference between how council ranked it versus how staff ranked it, that's your difference there. So we just flagged a few of the larger gaps. I say larger. To be honest with you, staff's and council's rankings were very closely aligned. We mirrored this process after our blue ribbon process. We also found in that process that, again, staff and that committee were very closely aligned as well. But we did just want to provide you with a little bit of extra information here. And then, Melissa, if we can drop that zoom down maybe to about 90% or 75%, that way we can get column I in there as well. Thank you.
So on the discussion, we just wanted to make sure this developing the maintenance, I think this one we all agree we want to look at that for next year. We want that to be objective for next year.
Which one was that?
Number one, develop a strategy for maintenance and rehab of existing apartment complexes.
Yep.
Yes.
Can I get a clarification on that? So that's really, it says develop a strategy. So there's all of the, we've done several things like multifamily inspection, which would be part of that strategy, but it's developing of a strategy, not like executing something other than it's coming up with a plan of attack, it sounds like.
Is there a way to go through our existing multifamily and like we do with the roads, and prioritize. I hate to say the worst is up at top, because they have all this that needs to be done. Is there any way to do that? I'm not talking about individual inspections. I'm talking about looking at the property as a whole.
Yeah, I think
and
that
kind of putting it on a priority list.
Sure, I think that could be part of the strategy that we come up with. I mean, I think we'd have to address all multifamily, but I think part of the strategy can be focus on the worst, and how do we, when we say quote-unquote worst, what does that mean?
Is that like code enforcement
Is it age or code
violations?
enforcement? Is it complaints, calls for service, all those things? We can work through that.
I agree that I think having a strategy is important, because I don't necessarily think, as much as we want to have, we want to focus our, even our affordable housing tools that we have, we would love to see rehab versus new. It also, like, we almost kind of have to wait for them to come to us. So if there's a way that we can build a strategy that would hopefully get them to the table, target the ones that we are, like Ronnie said, the worst of the worst, and get those to the table, I think that would make a huge quality of life impact. So I think the strategy is probably going to have to be, going to have a real sharp pencil on that.
Okay.
I think one and two play together pretty well. I think you almost got to look at both sides. It'd be almost nice if you had a perspective sheet for each one of these properties, and some of the bullet points for, maybe prospective affordable housing folks. Like, okay, well, we already got ideas on, like Basswood. I know that one because I went, I was on a ride along and just saw how bad that property is. So something like that is, okay, we already know this needs this, and this, and, okay, you already got kind of a idea, a starting point for some of these developers.
Okay.
So with that, we could talk about the nuisance abatement program and just expanding it to multifamily and hotel motel.
Let me pop in real quick. My concern on how I'm reading number one, and there's a couple of ways I can read it. I can read it specifically for affordable housing, or I could read it for everybody. And quite frankly, I don't want to be spending money on maintenance and rehab of facilities that are supposed to be handled by the private sector. Now, I get we have some like Basswood that have gotten away from us over the years, and I would, I think we have a list of all of our affordable housing properties. Does that list have when they're going to fall off?
Yes.
So that, to me, is where I would be wanting to focus this conversation is how do we focus on keeping that stock of affordable housing? And then for the strategy for maintenance and rehabilitation, what I'm concerned about is you have somebody that goes, oh, well, the city's going to backstop me.
I think that there's a difference between, so with our multifamily inspection, they should be meeting minimum code
Right.
at this point. So it's how to get those developers to reinvest for beyond just minimum requirements. So I definitely agree with you. We shouldn't be incentivizing anything that is to meet minimum code requirements. It's their responsibility. But I guess that's a question for council. Is there a desire to try to use tools to get rehab of some of these if there's no affordable housing provided? Is that something you guys want, or is that not what you're interested in doing?
If that apartment complex does not provide affordable housing and they meet code, I don't know if I want to spend time on them. Mm-hmm. Now, if what we're saying here is that we don't think code creates a space that's good, then maybe we need to look at code and up that. But the whole point of code is to create a minimum standard, right? And so,
Right, like
so if our
there's a
minimum
safe-
standard's not good enough,
No, I think having a safe environment where yes, I think that codes are fine for that. If you're wanting a renovated interior where people have an elevated sense of living, that's above and beyond what code is, right? So, and I don't know if that's, or having, your walls on the outside of Basswood Manor, let's just say, I haven't looked at every inch of it, but they pass code. But do you want to have them clad with some other type of material? Do you want to have something looking nicer in that neighborhood? I want to make sure I understand where.
If that will help us maintain the affordable housing stock that we have, and there's a way to work with them on that, in that arena, great. If it's a building that's making money, and these buildings make money, and we want to elevate that experience, I think that's different. Now, if they come to us and say, hey, we want to provide affordable housing options, then let's look at that. But again, if they come to us and say, well, I want affordable housing at 80%,
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I agree with that. This is, one, I think we're talking about capitalist markets. There's out, it meets code, it meets our requirements and standards. The extent that we have buildings that we think are below that standard as a city, we're going to set our standards higher. I agree this should be addressed as a code issue, not a one-off issue per building.
Okay.
Yeah, but not everybody, I don't have granite countertops.
Yeah, and I guess the comparison is with, and I'm not trying to push this, I'm just saying, like, we have aging strip centers that we provide incentives just to make it look nicer in our community, but you don't want to do that unless affordable housing is provided in multifamily, is what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, because I actually think doing that would actually be the opposite, because if we helped them kind of spruce up their property, they're going to raise their rent. So it's actually going to have the opposite effect of what we're looking for.
Fair enough. Okay.
Thank you. Anything more on 1 and maybe 2?
I've got some questions on 2. It says partially completed. Where are we?
So we are, with our CAD RMS system, we had to put that on hold. So we never, so basically what we ended up having, Chief Clemens had come to you, presented a very robust system where it was like not even multifamily or hotels, it was all properties across the city. And there were triggers. If you had X amount of nuisance crimes and you would receive a letter, you'd be put in kind of like an oversight process if you didn't correct them within a period. And then ultimately we could file a lawsuit at the end of the day, but the idea is to get compliance, not to try to file lawsuits. At this point, when our new chief came on, we were in the middle of a CAD RMS switchover, which the data you need to be able to get those numbers that say whether or not you fall into whatever category of enforcement. We didn't have that data readily available. So he came on, we got geographic accountability put out into the public, and so now we're to the point where they're fine-tuning that to bring it back to you to a workshop. So I would expect probably in the next 3 months, 3 months, that we would be bringing that back to you to have a fine-tuning with our chief having looked at it. I think the reorganization of the NROs and co-care will also play a role in that, but also the geographic accountability, who's responsible for carrying that load. I think Chief Rollins needs to look at all of that.
I'm curious as to why some of our sit and sip places
Are what?
bars are not up there. Some of
They will be included under the new.
Yeah, so this was what was in the original 2025, but you guys after, or not, 5 years ago when you had this action step, that's what was included, but you guys actually, we broadened it the last time we went to council, so it would be more than just those items.
One suggestion I would have is like where we have all these partially completes is maybe ongoing, since it's something that's going to be continuing. So partially complete kind of says at some point it will be complete. Ongoing kind of lets us know like this is something that's going, and we can kind of touch points on what those issues are throughout the year in presentation. Well.
Okay.
So then we have number 3, which was involve the entire diverse community in implementation of Lewisville 2025 and in service on city boards and commissions. You heard our plan for 2035 and getting implementation, and that engagement. We have question here more about the service on city boards and commissions. How far do you want to push that? We could say, in every board we want a certain makeup. Is that what we're talking about here? Are we talking about just naturally occurring? Trying to do more engagement in those efforts? It's really, what does successful look like here for us?
So I'll jump in first here. I think that second part is a natural output of our efforts to community engage. So I would prefer to put effort to engagement and let the engagement naturally drive the interest in boards rather than artificially constructing quotas. That's what I'm hearing. I think that's a better outcome. And this goes back to, how do you make sure that you don't have a bias in these things, right? And I know, Claire, I've talked about this many times, and I've talked about this with everybody, and we found that we actually get great outcomes from our employee application process by striking anything that would could indicate race, ethnicity, religious, whatever, addresses and names. I'm going to put forth again, this will be the last time I do this, promise guys, for 3 years. I've tried every year for 3 years, and I stand alone on this. But if it works so well for city, I would like to see that same thing tried for boards and commissions. And that's not an effort to try to marginalize those groups. It's an effort to try to acknowledge, I believe we have implicit bias, and it's an effort to try to get around that implicit bias. I don't know why we think our HR groups who are trained are subject to implicit bias, and managers who are trained are subject to implicit bias, but council members who, I'm going to soften this down, won a popularity contest, don't have implicit bias. So that's my thought on that process. So I'd like to see us remove things that might cause bias to adjust, one, and then two, I think if we do our community engagement correctly, we do get a boards that are made up of the demographic that reflects our city.
So, So I think that I agree with Patrick that better engagement with the community as a whole will drive more applications, because ultimately, we're not forcing people to apply for these boards. They have to take the first step to put in that application. To me, honestly, though, I feel like the word diverse can mean all sorts of things. So when when I'm looking at those applications, what I always say about the council is that, we all have different backgrounds, not just with, our personal life, but with our professional lives, that really just kind of give us all a different perspective, and I think that that's really important on every board and commission as well. So I'm looking at, what does this person do for a living? How long have they lived here? Some of that demographic data also, are they a woman? Are they a person of color? Some of those things, I think it's important to have that. Not that I'm necessarily picking off of that, but really I am looking to try to get as diverse a group as possible. So I don't mind having that information on, but anyway, to my point, the only really action item I see for city is just to engage a much broader engagement, which I think we're talking about doing through the Lewisville 2035 plan anyway. So I guess it would be kind of naturally occurring in fiscal year 2026 as well. Maybe there's another action item from that. I can't think of one. I'm not quite sure what that would be. Okay.
So I'll jump in real quick because I disagree with Kristen and Patrick on this one. I think how you measure it, it's basically we have the census. We know what our demographics look like. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to match that perfectly, but we know we're underrepresented by some folks because those people haven't showed an interest, or maybe just don't have time, or don't know. Probably it's more that they don't know. And I think the engagement things that we're going through are terrific. So how do we gauge success? Is how many people from these communities are applying? We know that those numbers are low. So we're trying to engage the Latino community. I know we've been trying to get someone from the Chin community involved in the city as well. So we just look at the numbers tell the story of how diverse we are or aren't. And it's not about making quotas, it's just about tracking, okay, here's where we're making strides, here's where we're not. And so we're trying with the Latino community. So I would hope in the next year or two, we'll see more people applying for boards. Now, does that mean you get on the board? No. But once you get that going, because when I got here, they were searching for their people on the boards for like 10 years. There was no interest in that. And now we're getting people who are excited about the boards, which is great, but we want to make sure that our boards look like our community as much as we can. And we can't, I'm not suggesting that we pick people based on race, ethnicity, or gender, but I'm saying we need to find a way to attract those folks. And how we count that is how many people are applying. Then once we get people applying, then how many people are we putting on the boards? Then it'll be back to the council to kind of take a look at that and make sure we have people who look like our city to give us the best, I guess I got to go Louisiana here, gumbo in this city that makes that gives us the flavor that we need and the representation that we need. So it's kind of pretending like that doesn't exist doesn't help. Just use the numbers.
I'd like to say, when I came here, I'm going to piggyback off what he said. We had very few applications, and we were appointing people to multiple boards. In the last 4 years, because of engagement, it has been working. We have more applications. Now we actually have a real pool in which to draw from. And the way that it's broken up, when we pair up to place people on board, not everyone that has filled out an application has been appointed, and some won't be appointed, because we do our due diligence in vetting who we put on these boards. And the only way you get to know them is by experience on other boards with them, in the community, and actually sitting down and interviewing and talking with them. So what has been going on in the last couple of years is working. It is working. Do we need to keep it up? Yes. And I think once we get the volunteer program up and the engagement and stuff going, it is going to have that natural flow.
I think Citizens University, I think, has made a big difference, so we need to keep doing that. It's been awesome.
I do want to chime in here, because I think actually Councilmember Jones and myself, we're actually not that far apart. I don't take that as disagreement, because I think the priority, I'm all for. Absolutely, I think that's the right priority. And I think to Councilmember Jones's point, understanding how our boards break up across whatever lines you want, age, gender, racial, religion, or whatever. I think those are great things you just kind of keep in mind and say, do we have an opportunity to better engage with a particular group? So I love the action priority. And especially to your point, diverse can mean lots of things, which I appreciate that. And I appreciate frankly, the diversity of the diverse comment up there, rather than saying it's going to be around a particular cohort of our citizens. So I don't think we're that far apart. I'll give a specific example, though, again, for the redaction of names. There's people that we know from social media. Maybe they'd be great, but if I see a name on there, my gut is, no, I don't want to do that. Or maybe they posted something that hit me a wrong way, they didn't mean to, and you immediately filter them out. So it's not just around filtering out for things like religion or gender or whatever. I think we may be missing some folks who could help at least get them past the first level, past the immediate rejection cycle, into the second level. When you sit down and talk with them, go, you know what? Yeah, we may not agree on this or didn't like your approach, but you actually do have some valuable input. So it's a way to prevent a filter up front on lots of different areas.
Well, I did just want to point out really quickly that on a application for a board or commission, I believe that the demographic questions are optional. You don't have to, so a lot of times we don't get that information anyway. I mean, I think we should ask, but I don't know, I guess it's not a good thing to make it mandatory to answer those questions either, but we don't get 100% of that.
Well, we can continue to make it a focus on engagement, and when we have vacancies on boards, to try and get word out and hit all of our demographics as much as we can in that vein. So we just wanted to talk through that and kind of what that meant to you.
And I'm going to throw just a couple more points onto this that I think what muddies the water for me, and I agree with Patrick, I don't think we're as far off as politics would make us sound. But when we're talking about boards and commissions, they're in a little different space. I'm not looking for a great mechanical engineer or aerospace engineer. I'm not looking for somebody that can out Stacy and I in parks. I'm looking for somebody who represents a part of the community that is to learn and give their input and their opinions on that. Now, the other piece of that is, as a council, we are looking for folks that align with what we want that to be. So when we talk about, maybe that person has put something on social media, well, they've maybe stamped out a policy position that's completely opposite what this board wants or this council wants, and now I'm going to put that person on the board that oversees that. I got a challenge with that. Those people are my eyes and ears, and I've got to trust that their filter aligns with my filter. That's how I approach it. Now, maybe that's wrong, but I don't think it is. I mean, there are a couple I can think of right off the top of my head where there's certain policies I don't want to see enacted in this city, and I'm not going to put people on that board that might have that conversation bubble up to me, because I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say no. So that's where I think this gets a little different from I'm hiring the best person for the job. I'm appointing a person to help represent the council and also bring a set of opinions and eyesight for a part of the community that we don't have. So that's what makes this hard.
Right.
I don't know if there's a good answer for that, but I do think that if it were blind, that would undermine some of the things I'm trying to achieve as council.
I mean, we've got to be careful who we appoint. The name is part of it. The one thing that doesn't need to go out is the name. How are you going to truly find out that person's background? If I'm going to appoint them to a board, I'm going to want to look at how they act in the community and on social media. Are they only there to disrupt and tear down? And if the answer is that's what it shows, and that's the experience that everyone has had of that person, except for themselves, the answer is no. The answer is no, but I won't know that if I don't know who's applying.
But I guess it depends on how far you take the process, right? So if we're going through and we're looking at the application and that's all we're looking for, then I agree. So I absolutely concur. I thought everybody made phone calls to people after you went through the first criteria. Then you go through, make a quick phone call. Talk to me about why you want to go on the board. And some of the things that you blind out in the application will probably come through in that second conversation. But if we're taking those applications and just putting them in yes, no without any further investigation, say, okay, well, maybe that's part of the issue. I'd like to at least have a secondary phone call with folks to find out, okay, we talked about things and I saw this post. Tell me what you meant by that. And the crazy will come out in that call. If it came out on Facebook and it's really there, the crazy will come out on the phone call as well.
So I think what I'm hearing is let's tread lightly on this. That we understand that we need some seasoning for the gumbo. That we have parts of our city that we need to work on, but I think that's going to be captured in other pieces. I don't know if I'm hearing consensus around mirroring the city hiring process.
Okay.
No.
Does that help?
Yep, I think we've got that one. Okay, so let's go on to the next one, which is providing Wi-Fi. This says at all public parks, but with highest priority given to low and moderate income areas.
So this one was, remember when we used to do the council pitches? This was my second year on council. This was going to be my pitch for the second year before I found out we weren't doing them. But this all came out of what happened when COVID happened, and we really saw that there was a good portion of our city that just didn't have access to the internet, and that just breaks my heart, because I feel like that's, how do you get ahead if you're, if somebody this group of people has Wi-Fi and this group doesn't? This is incredibly important, and I don't know what the cost associated with all of that, and that's my biggest question, and I know that we can't go from 0 to 100.
Yeah, we've marked this one partially complete because we've done 5 and we used ARPA funding for it. I think it was around $300,000. So obviously, we cannot do all parks next fiscal year and get it done, but we can continue to do a small number, and we are currently in the process, both our IT staff and our park staff, of looking for grants. Hopefully not federally funded grants, but grants that would also help us install Wi-Fi in parks. So that was something I think we all agree is important, and we'll try and do as many as we can, and you may see a budget request for that.
Okay.
And I'd love to see some metrics on utilization from the ones that we have.
Okay.
So
Good point.
we get an idea of bandwidth and.
Well, and I, with the metrics, I think it's also important to know do people know that the parks have Wi-Fi? Are we putting signs at the park that says this? Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
So, I mean, I'd be interested to at least have that as part of the
Stacy,
conversation.
do you know if we have any signs?
We don't have signs.
Okay.
You can't just feel the Wi-Fi when you walk in the space?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
so
an extra
I mean,
sunburn?
I think that would make a big difference if people don't really know that there's free public Wi-Fi there.
The kids will find it.
Yeah.
I'm going to lean into this a little bit as well, because this actually, I think it's become less controversial since COVID. But if you'd asked me about this item 5 years ago, right before COVID hit, I'm still equating internet maybe with cat videos and, fun little TikToks and stuff like that. But in my opinion, this is utility now. Just like I wouldn't go through and say who deserves electricity and who doesn't. I wouldn't go through and say who deserves plumbing and who doesn't. This is a way of life now. So I'm all for the public support of that utility.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of this. I think this is critically important if we're going to keep everybody involved. I mean, at least we say you've got Wi-Fi here. If you go to a lot of these conferences, they talk about this. I mean, a lot. I mean, everyone, it seems like they were talking about this.
This got me thinking, because I agree, I think with Patrick there, I think this is a utility. I'd love to see if there's a way to capture the folks that are using it like we do with a library card. If you're going to use a city utility, okay, it's free, absolutely, but you have to maybe apply for a Wi-Fi card with the city. Maybe that's just through the portal to give some information. But I think that would help us as well to get better engagement with our residents.
So you're saying so I just want to clarify, so if I'm going out to a park, I'm a kid, I go out to a park, I know there's Wi-Fi, you want me to have something, I have to do something to be able to access the Wi-Fi?
Some way that we could maybe connect with you, like whether
Okay.
that's, so like if I go to the courthouse in Denton, there's a little page that says I have to agree with, and it usually asks me to put in like my email address.
That's how UT Southwestern does, and that's how they keep up with their metrics and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. I put in my brother's email address for all that stuff, though, actually, so.
I put Patrick's in.
Sure.
But maybe it pops up a quick survey. Do you live in the neighborhood, or do you know, that kind of thing? I don't know, but there's an opportunity there, I think.
Okay.
That one we like, it's measurable. Do we have it or not? Yeah, nice and easy.
Yep.
The next one is evaluate additional activities that would bring people to Old Town, and that can be a number of things.
So for this one, I know that we have talked about, there's been some discussion about, we've done a lot in Old Town. We're done with Old Town. And I saw that the difference between where council had Old Town and where staff had Old Town, Old Town was like, what number 12? So I took this survey the day after we had our DCTA retreat, and really what was sticking with me is that, Michael Morris from the COG came and he talked to us, and he's essentially talking about we as a region have to be looking at how do we all need to be investing in our public transportation systems that are really more of our mass transit systems, not just our highways, because we can't build it, So what the COG is doing, and what I think they're going to continue to do moving forward, is they're going to be looking for ways to incentivize communities that are investing in transit-oriented developments. And and we've got a whole lot going on right around our station, and we also have a whole lot of land out there that's really close to it as well. There's a lot of work to be done that I think the city is going to have to continue to be a part of, one, but two, if we do, and we continue to prioritize it, I think the COG is going to be willing to be a participant, which is really important as well. So that's why I think that drove Old Town up on my list as being super important, because it's not just about Old Town, it's about how are we getting assistance from, the COG to help in other areas of our city. Yeah, absolutely.
I think on this item, though, it's very specific about activation of Old Town, not necessarily the infrastructure. At least I'm reading it that way. So maybe evaluate additional activities. So like to me, when I read this, I think we're going to be taking the well house and turning it into a visitors information center. Could we put more games and stuff out in front of the city hall that people who work at the visitors information could hand out, like paddles for ping pong and things like that? Those are the types of things I'm thinking this is about.
Okay, so that was not necessarily clear. Whenever I think about bringing people to Old Town, I'm thinking about people who are living here. Yes, people who are here for entertainment purposes, but really for the people that are residing here and who are also shopping here. So maybe that was just a little bit of a disconnect. Maybe that's the difference between kind of where I was thinking this item was and where staff was thinking. I do think that some of those things are important of how we activate, but I mean, having people live here is how we activate those spaces.
So
I would like to, last night when we left Prairie House, it was 8 o'clock. Old Town had gone to sleep. That does not help us. It is literally a 90-year-old woman that when the sun goes down, it's gone to sleep. The activities and stuff to bring life and energy and vibrance into that, we need those type of shops, okay? We don't have. Our Old Town block isn't nearly as long as, say, Grapevine. Grapevine did it right. There's people moving at any given time, at night, in the morning. It's very eclectic, but almost every single shop draws people in the doors. We need to find that secret sauce.
So I appreciate that. I'm going to put forth that maybe last night when it was 18 degrees wasn't the best data point for that, because I tell you, when we came back, wait, hold on, let me finish. When we came back from the, William, how good the name? Bruce Robinson thing that we did over in MCL a couple weeks ago, I left there about 9:30, and I was struck by how vibrant actually Old Town was. There was things happening in the halls. There were people out walking, and it made me very happy, actually. I went through, and I see that more often than not. So I don't know that I agree that it can always be improved, but I don't know that yesterday I'd use that as a data point, because I had the exact opposite experience just a couple weeks earlier when it was nice out.
Well, I live here and I walk it a lot, and yeah, there are some people that walk around, but that doesn't mean that there's a lot of activity. If you'll look at the times that most of Main Street businesses close, is when it's dark.
Yeah.
Nobody's open. Yeah. Well, how do you keep Old Town going if you don't have anything open?
That's a really interesting take on it, because when I read this, I was thinking, so what, more music festivals downtown, more 4th of July downtown? Sure. And this is, like, we do, I think, a pretty good job with that already, and I started thinking about dollars being limited resources, and, if I substitute in, how do we get more people to activate in Central Park? Okay. This is a trade-off that we're making. So my thought on this was we have a lot of activities in Old Town. I love Old Town. I come down here probably more than the village shops in Castle Hills. I'm down here all the time. I would like to see us find ways to bring more people from outside of Old Town into Old Town, especially out in the Castle Hills area. How do we get them out and explore their city and live in their city like we should be? But I was trying to think about what other activities would that be, and should we start trying to activate other spaces in the city? So that's what I've been playing against.
So I'm going to jump in real quick. I think everybody's right, but I think what's going back to the sheet that we have here, I'm looking back at Old Town, and I'm like, I completely forgot about trying to have a maker space and all that stuff. Maybe this needs to evolve and be tweaked on what we need to do on a goal in Old Town, because I understand why staff is like, well, we don't need a maker space in here. This stuff is at least 3 or 4 years old, I think, when we were talking about that. So maybe the evolution needs to be of, creating more businesses at night, because I do agree, but I've been here long enough to remember when there was only a Subway in Old Town, and you could roll up the streets at 3 o'clock. We're making improvements, and, maybe this needs to be tweaked to, activating businesses, maybe extending Old Town, trying to find developers, things of that nature. Then that would become a higher priority for staff. That'd be more of an economic development idea. It is better than it was, but, like it can be ongoing and something else. I think that this one we need to tweak a little bit to kind of date it up to 2025 and not 2014.
I'll jump in too. I agree it needs to be tweaked, but I think a big thing is also there are people that still don't know in Lewisville that we have Old Town. I mean, I run into people all the time who have no idea what's going on down here, and I try to let them know, but we have to find some way of, I know we've worked on getting the word out, but I'll keep beating that bush. We need to somehow, and I don't know the answer, but we need to let people know that there are things going on here. I talked to people who've lived on the west side of I-35 for 20 years and had never been across the bridge because they didn't know anything was going on down here. Doesn't make any sense to me, but that's, I guess, the communications, how we get the word out is a big thing.
I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with Ronnie on this. I think I took this completely different than what Kristen did, but yeah, I think this to me is about activating Old Town. It's like, but one of my biggest things I think when I was trying to get on city council is just like this, we roll up the sidewalks downtown and it's dead. And I think we're almost there. I think we got Old Town Craft coming. I think we got a few things, but it's like the Grapevine experience. It's like, I think that's what we're looking toward, to something like that. So somebody there's multiple things that people want to be downtown on. It's not going to be every night, but yeah, maybe not 18 degrees, but there's that one thing. Maybe it's the London Baker, maybe it's it's places like that. But that's, I think, what a jazz club, those kind of things.
I think where my head sits on this one is absolutely, let's keep figuring out how we can make this and continue to grow this. A lot of my reading over the last 6 to 8 months on redevelopment in cities and downtowns has been that cities are much more involved, or need to be much more involved, in the curation of the space. So going to McKinney and Grapevine and seeing what are the things that are out there that would work here, and being more actively engaged. I know historically we've kind of let the market do that, but I think the market is looking for those opportunities to work with us instead. There's so much noise out there now that we've got people that just don't even realize they can come across the bridge. Well, that's the same for business owners as well. They may not even realize that there's an opportunity. So how do we curate that? And I don't think that's just an Old Town thing, by the way. I think that's a Northern Gateway thing. I think that's going to be a mall thing. We just happen to have developers that are trying to build that out in those areas, whereas I think Old Town's a little more organic.
I will say real quick, for anybody who might be listening, there's nothing more cozy than going to Perk at 8:30, I think they close at 9. I like to go out there in the evenings and just sit and have some nice tea or something. It's a cozy little space. It's kind of fun. So high recommend to get out in there and live in Old Town.
Awesome. Let's move on. Are we good? We're good with 1 through 5? We good? Any of the ones on 6 through 10? Do we want to deep dive on these, or do we want to just keep moving along?
So I would like to tweak something, or at least put this out there. Which one is it? So item 8, think it's too narrow. When I look at item 3, and when I look at item 7, we just talk about cohorts. It doesn't matter to me if the cohorts that need a hug are seniors, are they female, are they religious groups? If we find people out there who can't connect, I do think we should be reaching out to everybody. I'd like to broaden that out, frankly.
That's fine. Council? I don't have an issue with that one. Anybody else? All right, so that kind of moves us through. I think data-driven, of course, geographies and whatnot, it kind of ties into all the other conversations we've been having. The connected city, again, that talks with TSTC and some of our other tools that we have out there, maybe LISD. We talk about green centerpiece. Yeah, again, funding this year is going to be a challenge, but it always is, with the instability that we're having at the federal level.
And that one is a planned 4B bond, upcoming bond, so that's something that you'll see come back to you fairly soon if you'll have the opportunity to weigh in on that a couple of times coming up in the
And on
year.
number 10, whether we do that in-house, whether we figure out somebody that we can partner with and, do some sort of collaboration, I think that's critical to be able to have contact points. I mean, I know how much better we do with companies when we have conversations with them. I go back to Ericsson and the great conversations we've had with them, and being able to help them get their LEED certification, being able to plug them into DCTA, I think that just makes things better. I think we focus on the Mary Kays of the world, but I mean we got tons of great businesses that people don't even. They probably aren't terribly connected to the city, but they're an amazing business. I mean, we talked about Wuwiden, being one of the top Chinese restaurants in the whole Metroplex. We've got Starship Bagel. I mean, I'm going to focus on food right now because apparently I'm hungry. But there are lots of great. We talked earlier. Claire mentioned we have a bunch of folks that have businesses that have an education component. I think those are key. But there's a way for us to create that. I've been a huge proponent of this, and I just don't know why. Well, I have some personal ideas, but I'm not gonna go through that. But I think having that better connection with our business community is critical, and how we do that, I think we definitely need to put a bigger focus on it. Because we've got a huge one, right? I mean, there's a reason our tax rate is as low as it is, and it's because we have a great business base.
Yeah.
Council, any others in there that you think need to move, need to change, want to give some input on? Any concerns about 11, 12, and can we get 13 on there? So these are kind of the three that maybe there was some disconnect. Well, I wouldn't say disconnect. They just didn't pop up as high on one list or the other. Are there any of these, like 11 through 13, that you think is a you want to make an argument that they're not an edge case, that they actually need to be in the top? I feel like we're doing a pretty good job with number 13 already, but I'm not sure what staff's differentiator is on that.
Just overall, staff ranked everything lower than council did. So just because it's lower on here, it still may have been about the same priority for us.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we'll look at these and try and bring you back these throughout the year, kind of progress on where we are. They'll be your short-term kind of more reporting on, and you may see budget items related to those in the coming year.
Does this give you what you need?
Yes.
Okay. Council, I appreciate the deep dive on this, and I think because we spent a little bit of extra time on this, what we're going to do...
we still
I'm
have
so sorry, we're done with this.
Oh, we're done with this slide.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. That's my fault for
We
not
only have
checking
a
the
few more.
slide count. How many more slides?
We only have a couple more, but it may take a minute, so
Yeah,
we just need
sure,
to...
that's fair.
So you have actual items that fell, those were the ones that were the top priority.
Yep.
You still have another 24, I think, items that are on that list, our original 2025 list. Our plan is to, as we're developing the Lewisville 2035 plan, we'll bring those into that plan and start the discussion with those. Some of these that we talked to today will obviously be in that plan as well because they're ongoing now more than just a checkbox. But there were these scores that were fairly low on both of ours, and on the average, you can see that they were around 5 points or lower. We didn't know if you wanted us to bring these into the 2035 plan as well, or if you would rather we say we're good, we don't need to pursue those right now.
I mean, what is it going to hurt to bring it in?
Well, if there's...
Bog down the...
Yeah, if it's just resources that, I mean, right now we've identified as not great.
Right.
So do we want to continue to not grade them? I'll give you one on 38. And I mean, I loved the idea of it. How do we create signage, and maybe we find a place to put a Koreatown or a Venezuela town, or put in, I don't see that happening. I mean, look at how long it took for us to just even talk about that kind of thing for Old Town.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have it, but it's been a decade. So is it reasonable to think that we're gonna be able to create these little pocket neighborhoods like, okay, here's the valley, and we're going to create the valley identity and put in some placemakers and all of that stuff. Is that going to take 10 years? I think it's beautiful on paper and sketches out. I just don't think implementation-wise, where are we going to find the little property pieces to do it? Where are we going to find the community that says, hey, yeah, we're going to agree on this? I don't see that one as being going to get a lot of traction.
I have a similar take on that, and that is, but I just would make it a priority. I'm not against it. Actually, I think if it organically pops up and something just looks like it'd be great, I'd love to explore that a little bit, but I don't see a need to make that a priority focus for us over the next 10 years.
And PEP lets you do that. I mean, you can get street toppers and all that for your neighborhood if you want to, it's $500 in matching grants, and then the city. So there's ways to do it.
Okay. I definitely think you're right with regard to the average single-family neighborhood. It's hard to get, I mean, if I were to tell my neighbors, we're now called the Valley, people would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, and why is that name here? I mean, we understand why it's called the Valley, but then there's other areas, like you said, that are more organic or maybe not organic, like the Lake District. Like, we're actively working on branding for that, so that might work in that regard. The small area plan, we came up with Old Town North, and that community said they wanted to be called Old Town North. So I think we've gotten input where through process, we've kind of collaborated on that. I think that might be possible. I just think that the average single-family neighborhood it's going to be hard to put that together. So I agree with you on the, if it comes up organically or through another project, it might make more sense, but.
And just so, like, I was part of I guess technically I do live in Old Town North, and we did, the residents that were, in attendance at some of those meetings, we did all agree, yeah, Old Town North sounds good, but I can almost guarantee you none of us have ever said, oh, well, what neighborhood do you live in? Old Town North? I don't, so I just don't think that it's used.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just say really quickly, I'm like, if we're going to be a data-driven city and these fall off the list, we have enough to do. So why don't we just?
I don't see any of these. I think 37 would be one that maybe you hand off to Independence Gardens or some other organization and let them run that.
Okay. So we only have one remaining slide, and this one just kind of goes over what Claire actually talked about a little bit earlier, that these would become your short-term Lewisville 2025 top action priorities you'll see more about in the coming year. Then the medium term, we're still focusing, these are the ones that you actually adopted last year. And we wanted to go over those again to make sure these are still where your head is focused. We talked about a lot of these at the retreat already. And in particular, we've talked about affordable, well, all of these will have some cost to, well, not all of them, I guess, but city infrastructure, where we talk about the water rate, the needs there, that's definitely going to be a focus. Affordable housing. We may or may not have costs associated with the Lake District in the upcoming budget, but it's definitely a focus and a lot of time staff will be spending. Beautification initiatives, you really haven't seen a lot of discussion on that in our retreat this year. What are your thoughts on keeping that as a high strategic focus area for the coming year?
Council?
I think it's important because I think ultimately what it boils down to is how people feel about the place that they live, and if it's run down, I think it just waterfalls into so many things that, if we can continue those efforts and show that we care, I think once we make that step, then it's contagious. It will be picked up by people who maybe live there and like, oh, well, if they're keeping this place up, then it encourages other people to do the same, and then they feel good about the place that they live, and then they want to engage. So I just think there's waterfall benefits that come from that are really important.
It's like when I was talking about Grapevine secret sauce, that's a very high priority for them. And it draws a lot of people from all over the place to it. Just to see, when I drove through there this past week, all the pictures of the powwow, that I absolutely love, by the way, and all the public art and the gazebo and all the places where you can do selfies and pictures of your family, they were full. And had they not made that a priority, it's just another drive-by.
I do have a quick question. I think I had to step out for the last part of the mall redevelopment conversation. So we've been talking about this for 2 years. We've been working. I get it's a strategy. It's not like building a doghouse. It's an entire area. Realistically speaking, when will we see the first bulldozer out there? Is this 2028, 2031, this year?
Definitely not this year.
Okay.
I mean, so I think I think I went through the phases. So phase one was the visioning. So we finished the visioning where we came up with our own plan and then tried to support to get the number of mall owners to be reduced and to find a mall owner that actually was wanting to do something. The last year has been spent on the owner redesigning everything that's something viable and then presenting it to council. So that next step is going to be getting all the other mall owners on board, submitting a zoning plan, and then they have to get financing. So I'm thinking 4 to 5 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you for
Sorry,
thank you for your honesty. Appreciate it.
I want you to be, it's a big project.
Okay. Set my expectations. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then we talked about 2-minute walk to a park and kind of the funding that we have set aside for that and some of Stacy's plans there.
Wait, Gina, hold on. So going back to the mall redevelopment, so really at this point, that's really mostly in the developer and property owner's hands, right? So, I mean, is that something that this is where I'm not sure. Does it need to remain on this list?
I think this list is not just, and it's up to you, but I will tell you, for this to succeed, we have to keep our,
time kills
we have to keep focused on it. And you can look at this with regard to, it's feeding into budget. There probably won't be a budget request coming this next year associated with it because all the costs would be in the developer's hands right now. But you are going to be spending a significant amount of staff time going through the rezoning and all those types of things. So it is when you say strategic focus area, it is a focus that staff would need to be focused on.
And if I push this out into a long-term, 8-10 years, then I'm going to start getting to the end of when I can spend those bond funds responsibly. So that, to me, means that we've got to help push in the intermediate term to make sure that all aligns, because we've got that carrot to sit out there. And I would hate to have us waste it.
Well, I mean, I guess so with that being the case, I mean, it's almost kind of similar to Old Town as well, which is not on the list. So I guess that's where I'm having a hard time, where it's still important. There are still things happening with it, but is it something that staff is driving and putting? I guess, like, will there be budget requests for it?
I don't think there's going to be a budget request this year. No.
I mean, is that necessarily what this list is supposed to be?
Well, The short term, I think, is, but the medium term may or may not be.
Yeah, so this is, what we're trying to get, I guess, what we're trying to transition into is having this, because when you look at that strategic focus area, that is your middle range. Like, where do you want focus over the next, not necessarily budget year? And that's where we're trying to make the distinction with the stuff on the left, which is going to be in future years saying, where do you want us to, you know we're going to have to put a budget request in on this. Now, I will say that medium term is maybe 2 to 3 years of time frame of strategic focus area. I think it informs us onto staff's, I don't have a great, I guess my problem is I don't have a great answer for you of saying this has to be associated. It's really up to you guys what you want to do on strategic focus areas. Does it have to be related to budget, or can it be related to staff time? You're right, Old Town moved to mission critical. You could move mall redevelopment to mission.
I think the mall is probably, all of that stuff in the medium term is where it needs to be, where we keep an eye on it and we update as necessary. Because to Kristen's point, it reminds me exactly of Old Town when we couldn't get developers to develop some property that we had. We couldn't get somebody to clean up some of the things that we had here or see it as a viable place to build. I remember a point when we didn't have a parking garage. When we talk about, yeah, we'll probably get a parking garage in 10 years. And then now we have 2 or 3 actually. So it's going to be a slow trog, and then it's going to be a race. It is going to turn, and once that faucet turns on, and we don't necessarily have control of it, but we better be ready and kind of engaged with the mall folks, because we went from how many owners, 7 or something like that?
It's like 5 to 3.
Yeah, so it's a slow trog until it's not, and a lot of these things, you know, we can kind of push to the back burner, but the mall is one thing we want to get going. It looks like I like the plan that we saw. You know, we've come a long way from where we were. I would love to see one of those retail places kind of go away, but that's just my opinion. But that has to work its natural course, and we just have to keep an eye on it. We don't control it, but we can definitely try to help guide it and have some say in that to help get moving forward. So I like where we are in the medium term. You know, Old Town is always going to be on the list of things to do, but it somewhat is driving itself. We just need to kind of help mold some things we want. Just my take.
Grocery store.
Yep.
We have one now.
One of the other things we would talk about is Business 121. It says corridor planning. We've adopted the plan now.
Right.
So do we want to change that to implementation?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
To see like what's the word, a catalyst project happen. And again, that's another one that's not completely in our control, but, you know, I think that there's things that we can do to push.
And I think we're good with the short term with the caveats that were identified during the discussion.
What'd you say?
I think the 2025 short term, 2026 short term are fine with the caveats that we identified during the discussion, because, I mean, we just took the language forward.
Sure. Go ahead.
The only other one I wanted to talk about was the fact that we've talked a couple of times at retreat here about the retiree insurance, and we've talked about volunteer management. And when we look at the budget related to those don't really fall into any of your current strategic focus areas.
I guess volunteer could be public engagement.
Yeah, it could be, you're right.
Yeah,
the volunteers
volunteer
could be under public
definitely
engagement.
Yeah, that's public engagement.
We've had a strategic focus area before about, what was it called?
Employee recruitment, development, and retention. That fell to mission last year, but with this large push, financial push to address the retiree health insurance, is that something you want to push to medium term at this point as a strategic focus area?
What difference would it make to just keep it mission versus pushing it to medium, or doing the same thing regardless, right?
Yes, you've given us direction. I think it's just whether or not you want it to align with your strategic focus areas.
I think it's a necessity regardless of that. It's just a foundational necessity.
It helps us in our budget process because we tie everything back to either a strategic focus area or a priority.
Okay.
And if we don't have one that means that it's a priority of yours, then it makes it difficult in our process
got
to
you.
tie to it.
Now I got you.
Are
Yeah.
our people not our infrastructure?
No.
We don't consider that.
We need to.
I think you have so many infrastructure needs that would just make that.
That would be your whole budget.
That would be your whole
People and
budget.
infrastructure would just be one category.
Is a priority.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to create some words to slam it into something, which is what I feel like we're trying to do. But I mean, it's important that we pay our people and we support our people. I think that happens all the time. You know, if we came back and said, hey, we need to do something for this group of employees because it doesn't let us be competitive otherwise, I mean, is anybody going to sit here and go, wow, that's not in our medium-term list. We can't do it. We'll just continue to be uncompetitive. I don't know if that makes sense.
Find a spot, stick it in there.
Well, I'm aligned, actually, Mayor, because this is one of those things that, there's foundational things that you just do to be an organization, whether that business or city, where you just do some things. For example, you could say training's important, right? Well, if we went from having no training to where you made it a priority, so everybody got trained, that doesn't mean when you stop making that important, you stop doing training. It just means that's now ingrained in the foundation of what's now our city. So that's where I kind of get mixed in this. Like, I'm not saying it's not important, I'm just saying I expect that to be part of the foundation of what we do. And I realize that if there's individual specific budget impacts that we have to do, then I'd rather talk about those than couch it all under, is it important to retain great people?
One of the things that we require of our departments when they submit an action step is they have to select a big move or a strategic move. Despite the specific items we identified here, they can still select, oh, we're going to value people, we're a values-driven organization. So they do still have that option as well. It's just additional information that we provide to you in budget. We don't necessarily, call that out specifically, but that is how we organize our presentation during workshop.
Okay.
So I appreciate that, because you tie everything back to something. I typically call those more pillars. These are the pillars that make up the community or the organization. Now, those pillars may not line up with an action priority because it's a pillar. It's just something I do. So I'm going to tie a specific training to one of two areas, priorities or pillars. It's just the way I think about that. But I appreciate that. Tie it back to something that we've all agreed to, so we can basically see how it fits into the bigger plan.
So to help staff, like you're trying to make this, which strategic move are you trying to put this under?
I think we found a solution.
Okay, yeah, so
We can tie it to big moves or strategic moves, and one of our strategic moves is valuing people, a value-driven organization.
We can make it work.
So there you go.
I think we set the priority on paying them, so whatever strategic move that you need to put it under, that's more of a management action, and I don't think we need to be.
It is. We were just
in
trying to
that.
make sure that it worked with our budgeting process. We are very militant about you have to tie back to your priorities or your plans. So anyway, okay. We're good.
I believe that is all that we have for you in this presentation. Okay. Thank you.